Hi everyone, I'm Hannah. This is my channel, Punksteading. I also run a blog. The link is in the description below. And I wanted to do an introduction video, what this channel is going to be about, some of my goals, and how I came to want to do a project like this. So let's dive into it. A little bit about me. I grew up in the South and eventually found my way out to the Pacific Northwest. I have settled here. I live in a small studio. It's just one room. I'll give you a tour later. But I have a really small kitchen and my bed here and a small bathroom, but it's really just one room and I absolutely love it. I have access to a really nice yard, and my landlady's main house is just a stone's throw away. There is a nice sized horse barn right behind my studio, and in exchange for barn chores, looking after the animals, and yard work, I get money off my rent. So that's kind of how I exist, and those factors will come into play in later videos and blog posts. I wanted to touch on how I got into homesteading and why it sparked my interest. Two things over the past year really reignited that interest. I've always been a little bit interested in homesteading even before I knew that it was an actual term, because my granny taught us grandkids how to garden, how to sew, how to cook from scratch. But I really hadn't thought about any of that stuff in a really long time. But the first thing that happened over the past year was the pandemic. Like so many other people who have come into the homesteading community, I realized pretty abruptly how dependent I was on the American food system. I really didn't have a backup plan in case the grocery stores went down, in case there were empty shelves for a week. I didn't necessarily panic, but I was made very aware that I wasn't prepared should anything go wrong. So, I remembered my my gardening and my canning and my cooking from scratch that my granny taught me, and that sparked something in the back of my brain and moved it forward. So I began researching how to grow a really nice garden, and with that came how to cook from scratch, and there are better resources for power than relying on the grid, and there's a better water system than the septic system in place. So it just kind of took me down a wonderful little rabbit hole and introduced me to all these families living self-sustainably and self-reliantly, not really depending on any sort of outer system, which was really cool to me. I absolutely loved that concept of independence. The second thing that happened was I moved out of the city. Like I said, I am part of a work trade here on a horse boarding facility. And that's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made for myself. So before I was living in my absolutely wonderful little studio, I was in a dingy, dark, stuffy basement apartment. I had absolutely no access to outdoor space. I had nowhere to grow a garden. It opened directly on the street, so I would step out of my house and I would be on concrete, and I would be on concrete all day, and it sucked. It was noisy, and I had no windows. Well, I had one. It was like this big, and there was a street lamp that glared in my one window at night. I could not sleep. I hated it. So moving out here was such a breath of fresh air. It's quiet. I get to listen to the rain when it falls. I have access to a beautiful yard. I am planning on putting a little herb garden outside my door once springtime rolls around. I just feel so much more at ease here. And so I can relax and I can practice my hobbies here. So that's kind of the homesteading aspect of this channel, but it's called Punksteading. So where does the punk come in? And that, my friends, is, I don't even know where to begin, because punk rock has been such a huge positive part of my life for so long. I first discovered punk rock in college. Shout out to Matt. Thank you so much. The punk rock movement has changed my life, as you probably already know, and I hit the ground running with it and have never looked back. So thank you. And so many people write off punk rock as loud, as aggressive, as a little blip in musical history, and that's not true. Punk rock became an absolutely amazing movement, but it first was established when some kids rebelled against the mainstream hair metal, over-dramatized music of the 80s. Kids just didn't want that. They were sick of the music industry telling them that they couldn't be musicians unless they were Van Halen, and unless they could do epic guitar solos and have giant pyrotechnics and whatever. So kids rebelled. They took, crappy yard sale guitars and broken amps and borrowed drum sets and practiced after school every day in a garage and threw their stuff in a van and went absolutely anywhere they could in the country to play their music for people who desperately wanted something different, who desperately needed something different. And that's kind of how the punk rock rebellion was born, from kids just saying, no, like, your music sucks, we want something different, and we're gonna make it. I absolutely love that about punk rock. Of course, it didn't just stop with music, it became an entire movement and an entire lifestyle. And I really can't tell you how much it has had an impact on my life. I'm trying to explain punk rock, but you really just kind of have to feel it in your gut. The best way I can explain it is, if you've ever felt like you're just kind of going through the motions, a cog in a machine, and you don't really know why you're doing what you're doing, but you've been conditioned to do it, and one day you wake up and you feel like, oh my god, this is weird, and why am I doing this? And I need to stop, and I am going to stop, and I'm going to do something about it, even if doing something about it is screaming about it and shaking other people awake. Congratulations, you're a little bit punk rock. That's what punk rock is. That's that gut feeling of, I am not satisfied with the status quo, and I can do something about it. So it's a simultaneous dissatisfaction and self-empowerment. It's beautiful. It's changed my life. Anyway, as I researched homesteading, I found so many parallels with punk rock. And that's so weird, right? Because people don't think of punk rock and think of homesteading. They think of punk rock and they think mosh pits and loud music and like gritty, grimy scenes. And people think of homesteading as, I have chickens and I have a beautiful garden and I live sustainably. They don't really mesh. But at each of their core, they preach independence, they preach self-reliance, they preach do your own research and figure it out yourself, and do it yourself your way for you. There's no one way to homestead, and there's no one way to be punk rock. And because I had such an understanding of punk rock going into my homesteading research, I was able to relate to homesteading much, much more. So that's one of the goals I would like to achieve with this channel and with my blog. I want to bring some of those similarities to light, and I want to want to really be authentic about this. I want to document my true experiences, my true trial and error, and what I do myself with the means I have in order to live a little bit more self-sustainably and self-reliantly. I also want this channel to be one of representation, because in your research, when you're looking at homesteaders, you're seeing the vast majority of people who own land, who already have, 20 chickens that are doing phenomenally well, who already have 2 milk cows and beef cows and some pigs and a beautiful, well-established garden. And more than that, they're usually married with like 7 kids, and they got into homesteading because they wanted to homeschool their kids and show them a better way. And I don't relate to any of that. I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids. I don't own my own land. Like I said, I'm part of a work trade. I don't have any animals. I look after horses. I would like to have chickens one day, but I don't have any myself. And I really don't have a well-established garden yet. I have 2 raised beds out there, but the soil hasn't been touched in years, so I kind of have to start from scratch. So I want this to be a documentation of my homesteading growth, doing what I can with the resources I have at hand, and hopefully being a little spark out there to help you just try something. You don't have to be this beautiful family of 9 working your own land to homestead. No, you can just be an average Joe who loves punk rock and wants to do it because she feels better about herself when she's a little bit more self-reliant. You don't have to do it their way. Do it your way. And that's really what I want to bring to light on this channel. So we'll see if I succeed. Just a couple more things and then I'll wrap it up. With each video, I will have a blog post. With each blog post, I'll have a video. So again, that link will be in the description below. This blog post is going to be very similar to the video, but hopefully in general, the video will be a little bit more interactive. It'll be a little more conversational like this. And the blog will be a little more of a how-to list thing. So like, how I set up my garden, or, a recipe that I used or something like that. That's really the only difference, but hopefully they'll complement one another. Oh, let's see. I think that's it. Again, I'm Hannah. This is Punksteading. Welcome, and let's take a journey together. Bye, guys.